All right. Boom. Here we are. I think we're all connected. Glory to Jesus Christ. Here we go. Oh, all right. Here we go. I don't know what's I am such a boomer with this stuff, guys. I'm hearing playback here of my own audio. Somebody knows. There we go. Okay, we're good. We're all set. Glory to Jesus Christ. So first and foremost, can everybody please say a prayer for my lovely wife who's putting our children to bed? We have a 10-week-old, my 10-week-old son, Ambrosio, and then my almost 4-year-old Amadea. She turns 4 on Saturday, so say a prayer for her. My wife's birthday is on Monday, and then my middle child just turned 2, so she's dealing with all 3 of them, and she usually does an incredible job. John in the comments, love you, bro. I knew he'd be the first one. He's the first guy for everything, my man. And what's up from Montreal? Cool, another Canuck in the house. So we're all good. This is the first stream of many, Lord willing. And this first one is I don't know why it's taken me so long to get on here and do something like this. First and foremost, I got to say that I am so immensely grateful for everybody that supported me on social media, and not just in the coaching capacity in my business or the apparel sales, like more than that, by spreading the content, by supporting, by subscribing, by liking, by commenting. And this is kind of part of this overall conversation today is how much social media has really, I mean, above all, how the faith has changed my life, but social media being an extension of that if it wasn't for my involvement on social media, even as a Protestant, I'm coming on almost 3 years to the day, being on social media, doing this type of work. And I'll tell you that the mission remains the same, although it's a little bit more refined. Back then, in the end of 2022, I was going through a really turbulent period, and how I got a lot of healing in that process. Not to use new agey terms, was through helping other men, and ultimately the goal was back then was simple: help men find God. That was it. And so the message now has gotten a little bit deeper. It's like help men. And of course, if women, help, if I can help women find God as well, I mean, glory to Jesus Christ. But I'm a man. I talk to men first, husbands, fathers, single men, etc. Anybody that finds value in this, it's deeper now. It's help men find the truth in the Catholic Church and the sacraments, sacrament of reconciliation, the Eucharist, finding themselves to Mass and the transforming power of those sacraments and how they, lend themselves to a deeper relationship with Jesus Christ. And of course, it goes without saying that we've got to mention the Blessed Virgin Mary, Mother of God. It's, the feast day of Our Lady of the Rosary. No coincidence. Have been many special occasions that have fallen on Marian feast days. And she was really the one that captured my heart and made me see Jesus through a perspective that I've never seen before. So, Ave Maria, gratia plena. That's all I have to say. But I know there's probably been a lot of people that have maybe listened to my Pints with Aquinas interview or Keith Nestor or any of my appearances on Avoiding Babylon. And I have to give a shout out to my boys at Avoiding Babylon that are probably doing their local stream right now as we speak. And what's funny about that is I'm actually purposely doing these going forward on Wednesdays so as to not conflict with their schedule. I love Anthony. I love Rob. I love those dudes over there. And being able to interact with people in real time in the comments and in the chats was awesome. So, welcome everybody that's here and everybody that watches this afterwards. And so what people can expect moving forward from this is, there's gonna be a lot of content. I want to interact with people. I want to answer people's questions. I want to add value. I love doing this stuff. It brings me great joy and great fulfillment. And but this first one, I kind of wanted to go into more, nitty gritty details of my reversion. A lot of people have listened to those aforementioned podcast interviews, and I don't say that in like a self-aggrandizing way, but in a way that it brings glory to Jesus Christ. And number one, too, the whole goal is, again, to find those prodigal sons and daughters. I have prodigal son tattooed on my hand. To find those prodigal sons and daughters and bring them back to the blessed hope. Bring them back to Jesus Christ. Because I know, like myself, who grew up without a father, there was always this father-shaped wound and hole in my heart. And, for a long time, we aren't worthy of God's love, yet he gives it to us. And it's so profound, but that's different than feeling fundamentally unworthy of being a person of faith, because you come from brokenness. And so what I'm going to get into tonight, a lot of the brokenness, a lot of the quote unquote trauma and the suffering, and how God has brought so much hope in that, and that those people that are struggling with, whether it be in addictions to pornography, they're struggling with ideation of, self-deleting, ending their own lives, substance use, drug use, fornication, etc. I dealt with all that. And so if I can lend some clarity and some hope that, hey, the church is especially for sick people. It actually is for sick people. It is a hospital for the spiritually sick. And that's the only way that we really find healing, is through the church, and furthermore through the sacraments. So that's what this initial one is all about. In the future, of course, we'll be getting into fitness stuff, fatherhood, masculinity, etc., bringing people on. I know my first stream is going to be with my boy Anthony Abate and Enoch. My boy Enoch. If you haven't listened to Enoch, okay, Catholic rap, that's like pretty much all I listen to these days. So go check out Enoch for sure. That those two guys are going to be on the stream in a couple of weeks, October 22nd, God willing. And one more thing I wanted to announce to people too. If you follow me on X, you already know this, but Father Dan Rehill, I'm very grateful to be able to call that man a friend, renowned exorcist, has invited me to have my own radio segment on Radio Maria USA. So following his show on Wednesdays, Lord willing, at 9:30 Central Time, I'll be running my own show. It's called the Mike Pantile Show. And so that starts November 7th, and I'm super grateful for that. So stay tuned for even more content that's also going to be streamed onto YouTube as well. So I'm going to be doing the weekly streams here with you guys in the evenings. I'll be doing that show in addition to my usual posting schedule on YouTube every week. So a lot of work, but may God be glorified. So, to kind of go into those other details of my reversion story, of course, it always starts, in childhood, of course. And I'll tell you, real talk, I've always been, I was a broken kid, just to put it simply. As early as I can remember, I struggled with depression, with anxiety. I was always very, very internal, despite on the outside looking like I had stuff together. People think I have it all together now. It's like that couldn't be furthest from the truth. I've got more stuff together than I have historically. I'm not abusing drugs or self-abusing and all those other things, but I'm still working my salvation out with fear and trembling. But at that time, I was unaware, because I came from a broken home. I went between my no-no's house, my mother's father. Those two people are absolutely my heroes, my no-no Francesco and my mother. And it was just me and my little brother Joe, who I think is in the stream right now. Love you, bro. And we went back and forth. My father lived with his parents, never really held down a job. And I don't say this in a disparaging way to bring dishonor. Actually, in fact, what's brought a lot of healing to me as a father is seeing that he was a product of suffering and poor fatherhood, and that kind of was passed down. And I saw this opportunity, that there's a shining light in all this brokenness, was that I had this opportunity to rewrite, my lineage, if you will, like planting a new tree in a whole new garden that required a lot of landscaping. There was a lot of weeds there. There was a lot of bad seeds. And so if my suffering can bring forth a new spring, a new summer, a new season, if you will, in the future generations to come with my 3 children, which are just the purest gift from God, them, and especially my wife, and God willing, more to come if he so wills it, then all of that suffering is worth it. So it's a story of hope. But going back and forth, I remember seeing things that I shouldn't have seen as a young man, as a young boy, and how a father and husband should interact with his wife or with his children. And always just kind of had a friend relationship, a buddy relationship with my dad. But I remember always wanting to just be with my grandfather. And I promised myself I wouldn't get emotional on the stream. So pardon me if I start talking about, there's something about my no-no and talking about my great grandmother that just spurs up those old emotions. Glory to Jesus Christ. But I always wanted to be there. We ended up there full time. And I remember going through school, and it was just a turbulent time. I was in and out of therapist offices. I was on all kinds of antidepressant drugs, SSRIs, benzodiazepines, so Ativan, Valium, Xanax, etc. And I remember this was really ominous in how this kind of came to be and how this came full circle. But I remember in one of the therapist's office, I was quite young. I was in early teens. I remember telling him, his name was Neil. I'll never forget his name. And I said, Neil, I had this feeling that I'm going to be an alcoholic when I'm older. And this was before I really started drinking alcohol. I just knew that I was a downer type of guy because I'm so high strung. I felt these emotions, especially anxiety, so intensely. And I wasn't really ever interested in doing, you know, things that would speed you up, even though that came to be false. I ended up using that stuff as well, cocaine and other such things later on in life. And again, I'm not saying any of this stuff to glorify past sins. I'm just kind of giving you the depth of, you know, the suffering and what I went through, you know, on the come up as a kid. And so, you know, going through my early life, this is when the internet pornography really became a thing. You know, I remember dial-up internet, AOL. We had to unplug the phone line, and then I remember getting high-speed internet, and then pornography kind of came onto the scene. And it was wild, and it was unprecedented because nobody really knew. I mean, of course, if we came from, you know, a background that was strong in their catechesis, we would know that this was a sin against purity, a sin against the sixth commandment. But you know, and I'm not blaming my family at all for this. You know, they were a product of poor catechesis. I was a cradle Catholic, baptized, you know, received the sacrament of confession, the Eucharist, etc. But I didn't end up getting my sacrament of confirmation, which then again came around full circle later on in life, which I just received May 7th of 2024. So that was it's interesting how those like baptismal graces, those graces from those sacraments are just kind of waiting there, especially for those lapsed Catholics waiting to be claimed, and they're just like a gift that just keeps on giving. And I would later then come to discover that. But the pornography use started really early, and it would just be all the time. And I would get into these relationships and we would fornicate. We weren't chased by any means. And I remember my first ever relationship with with the girl at the time. We weren't chased, and this relationship ended. I was 16 years old. And so to kind of give you a scope and a depth of how the alcoholism started. My no growing up, you know, we had the most beautiful garden. You know, he would plant, man, just rows and rows of tomatoes. I'll still never forget the first time I had a tomato from his garden. And just, you know, we had trees with pears, and there was so much. But he would also make wine. Okay. And so we had a wine cellar. And, you know, after this breakup happened, and you'll notice that there was, when these things would flare up, it would typically be around these relationships, which would then reveal to me a truth later on. But I was 16 years old, and I would be drinking like a bottle of wine every single day to myself. I'd it got to the point where I was breaking into the wine cellar. They had to put like a padlock on it because I was drinking him out of all of his wine. Not just that, they would find me passed out, blackout drunk, flat on my face as a 16-year-old kid, 17-year-old kid, you know, in the basement. I was chain smoking cigarettes. I, you know, couldn't really hold down a job because I was just dealing with these, you know, quote unquote mental health issues, depression, panic, suicide, the whole bit. I hated going to school. School was a source of anxiety. I excelled in the athletic realm. I was captain of all my teams, but I didn't know how to learn in that environment, you know, sitting down with a teacher, you know, and everybody thought I was stupid, you know. Maybe I'm a little stupid. I don't know. My charism wasn't in that specific context. Let's just put it that way. And so, you know, long story short, you know, when I was in grade 10, I dropped out. And again, this alcohol issue was really prevalent throughout, you know, my teens. It was really bad. And I have to give a shout out to all those teachers that work with delinquents like I was. I'll never forget, you know, a bad teacher can really set a person's life up for disaster, you know, in their early life. You know, they're looking for that formation, but instead they're belittled, made to feel like they were stupid. But I'll never forget, you know, there was two people that come to mind. There was Garth and Janice in the adult basic education program in Vancouver, British Columbia. That's where I'm born and raised. East Van, you know, to the core, East Vancouver, British Columbia. And I remember enrolling in this ABE program, and these teachers changed my life. They actually saw something in me. They saw potential in me. And they really knew how to water that, and they changed the trajectory of my life. I will say that if it wasn't for their influence, I probably wouldn't have finished school, and I don't know what I would have ended up doing. But I ended up getting my GED, my diploma through there. It was an instrumental time in my life, and they absolutely changed my life. But I dropped out, and again, the alcohol was still kind of prevalent during this time. I was in and out of these, you know, terrible relationships, again, not being chaste, falling away from my faith. And it was funny because this whole time coincided with me becoming like viciously anti-theistic, so I came up during like the four horsemen of the atheist era, so Hitchens, Dawkins, Sam Harris, and I can't remember the other person, but I read all the literature, God delusion, God is not great, etc. The Greatest Show on Earth, talking about Darwinian evolution. And that really heavily influenced me. And, nobody really did anything about it. They just knew I was going through a phase, but it was destructive. I even got like an atheist tattoo that's now, by the grace of God, covered up. Don't get tattooed, guys, just period. Okay. That's a story for a different day. But I went through this time. And of course that coincided with me becoming viciously alcoholic, right? I didn't just not like God. I at that time, Lord forgive me, I hated God. I hated everything about it. I had this father-shaped wound, this hole in my heart. I didn't know how to reconcile that. And there's that scene in Fight Club, and I'm going to butcher the quote, so this is not, word for word verbatim. But the narrator and Brad Pitt's Tyler Durden, the character, were talking about, hey, if your father here on earth is such and such way, how does that make you feel, or what does that tell you about God in heaven? And so I heard that. And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, there's a correlation. God, or the father, is supposed to be the the priest, prophet, the king of the house. And when he's absent and he's not there to catechize you, you're left to the wolves. You're left to, your own desires. You don't know what virtue is. Who's teaching you virtue? I'm a type of guy that I had to shout out Eric. Yeah, dude, I don't know what I'm doing, not cover up these tattoos. Shame on me. I probably should go to confession for that, shouldn't I? But if you didn't have that priest, prophet, king in the home to catechize you, to show you what virtue actually is, how do you go about doing it? Well, I had to touch the stove to know it was hot. And that is like for everything in my entire life. So I was kind of going through this period, and this was kind of like the first signal grace, kind of zoom ahead a little bit. I was always in debt and had no money, late teens, early 20s, still in these like useless relationships where I was fornicating, etc. And I discovered powerlifting. And this was the first thing that really began to change my life. So I was in this relationship and in and out of this relationship. And then I found this coach who took me under his wing. He was a Protestant Christian guy. He had his demons of his own, but, instrumental in getting me here to this point, because I became enamored with it. And the reason I became enamored with it was because I saw a kind of an excuse to stay fat. I grew up the fat kid. So I found powerlifting. I'm like, okay, so I don't got to be lean. I don't got to focus on my diet. I just get really big and really strong. Anyway, so this was like end of 2012. I discovered powerlifting. And then a year later, I went from like 240 to 300 plus pounds. I competed as a heavyweight. I was very mediocre. I actually joke about this. I actually looked like a fat lesbian when I was that heavy. Oh, you should see pictures. It was glorious. I looked like a circle, but I looked like a fat lesbian. Anyways, and I remember this was another moment that really changed my life, and that was instrumental. And in the midst of that, before that even happened, I had to tell you about this too. Again, had a breakup. We were fornicating. Guys, we're not meant to break up, okay? We're not meant to fornicate. I had this really interesting perspective because I've experienced premarital fornication. I've experienced, coming together in a civil context, the civil marriage context, before I knew that I actually had to get, my marriage convalidated or married in the church. And then I experienced that within the sacrament of matrimony. And let me tell you guys, I now understand from a mental, physical, emotional, spiritual level why God preserved this for the sacrament. It's unlike anything I've ever experienced before. It's just, and there's more on that later. But nevertheless, this relationship broke apart. I started to kind of drink again, and these ideations of ending my life came up again. And so I decided to admit myself in the brief intervention unit. I was starting to kind of just like lose my mind. And I remember having to like sign over papers, and I was there for like 72 hours. I was there for over a weekend. And I'll never forget, this is kind of the beginning of me coming back to faith. The girl I was dating at that time came from a very charismatic Pentecostal. I mean, it was crazy. I remember going to these services, and they would do the the boom shakalaka papaya papaya, shout out Kennedy Hall, laying of hands stuff. And I thought that was always very bizarre, but I started to kind of like entertain the faith again. I was smoking a lot of marijuana during this time, a lot of marijuana. There's like probably a 10-year stretch where I smoked a ton. And so I admitted myself in this brief intervention unit, and I'll never forget, they couldn't find a jumpsuit that was big enough for me at the time, because I was like 260, 270, something like that. And all I had was a Bible at my bedside, and I was interacting with these people that it just broke my heart. These people who were like truly, truly sick. Like, it gave me such a perspective, and may God have mercy on them. Heavily medicated, schizophrenic, or been heavily abused. And I remember my parents and grandparents like visiting me every day. I stayed there for a few days. And although I know I'm reading this verse out of context, at the time, I came back to the church as a Protestant, not understanding what that actually meant. And reading Philippians 4:16, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And that was a pivotal moment. And I accepted Christ back into my life again. I didn't live like a Christian, but at that time, at least I accepted Christ back into my life. And so that was an instrumental moment. I was kind of staring the devil right in the face. I spent this time over the weekend, and it was nightmarish. Let's just put it that way. So I come out, I continue my powerlifting pursuits. And then, one day I think it was the summer of 2014. I woke up one day and I was tired of being, overweight, obese. I'm only 5'11". So being 300 plus pounds, no matter how much muscle I had at the time, I was very, very overweight. So I decided, hey, I'm going to take control of this too. I'm going to start, tracking my macros. I had no idea what the heck I was doing, but I was going to do this. And so anyways, zoom ahead, 14 months later, I had lost 120 pounds. And I got in really good shape. I was ripped. I had abs, the whole bit. I was working out. I was a automotive mechanic. I was going into my second year. I did really well, actually, in that trades program. I was the first one to actually have a job in the entirety of the history of that program. The dean placed me in a job right after I was done. I worked at Volvo, and then I worked at Ford, and that was really cool. Absolutely hated that. Absolutely hated that. But dude, oh yeah, it was, dude, Ryan, permabulk is, dude, I can't even tell you, man. I was like narcoleptic, falling asleep, lower back pumps, just like walking across the room, walking up the stairs. But I loved lifting weights. I was like, I can't get away from this. My whole thought process behind getting that big was pretty simple. I've got this gut. Okay, I'll never forget. I would do something called the Treep test, and Treep is like a slang term for belly in Italian. And so when I would get a button-down shirt, I'd button it up and I would sit down and I would push my belly out. And if the button split too much, I knew I couldn't buy that shirt, because if I got bloated after a meal, I couldn't wear that shirt. It was so ridiculous. So I figured if I could just get my shoulders and my chest big enough, it'll make my fat gut look smaller. And well, that didn't really work. That didn't really work. And Tune, how was I making strength gains while drinking? I'll get to that. I don't know how I continued to do that even into my 20s. My work ethic in the gym, or just in general, when I take to something, is just like, that's a grace from God. But anyways, more on that later. But it didn't really work that way. I was very mediocre. Okay. At this time, I was around 300 pounds. I squatted like 540. I benched like 340, and I deadlifted around like 585 pounds. So like a mediocre heavyweight. So again, I dropped all this weight. I was starting to lift, heavier and heavier weights, but at like this physique where I kind of felt like Superman. Now, this is where everything started to kind of unravel. I was starting to discover my life again. I lost all this weight, and this was pivotal in me changing my life. If I didn't do that, I don't know where my life would be right now, because I'm a fat kid. That changed my life. I thought I would always be overweight, and obviously that's not true by the grace of God. And so in this time, okay, because I grew up mainly with a single mom, my great grandmother, who is my hero, the closest thing to a saint that I've ever known, my nono, and my brother, I discovered the red pill, which is a branch of the manosphere that came out of like the pickup artist movement in like the late 90s, early 2000s. And this deals with unplugging from, the mainstream normie world. And so I was very blue pilled in how I went about relationships. I was very simpy. I was a nice guy, People can't imagine that, because I speak the way that I speak now, and people can't envision that. Oh, I very much was. I was pathetic in a lot of ways. So when I discovered the red pill and I realized, oh man, I was going about it so wrong. I drank from the entire well of the red pill. I didn't know how to, because I wasn't living like a Christian. I wasn't able to look at it with prudence, pick the good, because again, your diagnosis of problems is good. They've got apt diagnosis. It's the prescriptions to said diagnosis that will send a man's soul to hell. I didn't know that. I had no idea. I had no idea to take these things virtuously. Now I do, but then I didn't. So this was the perfect storm. I quit my job as an automotive mechanic. I began working front desk at a gym, Spartacus Gym in East Vancouver. And again, that was another pivotal moment. And I lost all this weight and it became like kind of like a local kind of celebrity. I was coaching people for free, getting, understanding how to coach people. And I didn't know that this would later become a business that would support me and my family, but that's what I was doing at the time. And I absolutely loved it. But in discovering the red pill and taking this vanity that I had been growing and growing and growing, I became, that poster boy for the Playboy lifestyle, sort of fornicating, getting on all these apps, etc. And then, eventually I got fired from that gym. Our group got so big, it was becoming very disruptive. I was coaching people to powerlifting meets. I was lifting a lot of weight at that time, and our powerlifting crew had gotten really, really big. So I don't blame the owner at all for firing me. It was becoming disruptive. And so I'll never forget the friendships. And I was really in a relationship at the time, and I was flat broke, guys. I was like 21, 22. Okay. And there was this opportunity. And again, I didn't bankroll this. I maxed out credit cards to make this happen. But the girl that I was seeing at the time, and then my ex best friend, that sounds so retarded to say as a grown man, we had this opportunity to rent out this basement that this girl's father owned, to just have a gym and to start running my business. So I maxed out credit cards. We took out the space, and I had the opportunity to actually run my business rent free for a year, which, man, I look back at how God's taken care of me through this whole process. It's just been insane. Like I still deserve none of it, but especially at this time, I deserve nothing, zero. Yet here we were. I was a young guy. I started to put out some ads, local classifieds ads on Craigslist, Kijiji, etc. And my business began to take off. I'll never forget getting that first like $550 payment from my first ever client, Nirmal, back in Vancouver. I'll never forget his name. And things started to snowball. I was, out of this little place, I was making like six figures. I was a 22-year-old, right? And so couple that with, getting in good shape, discovering the red pill, living that lifestyle. Anyways, me and that person ended up breaking up. We moved into a commercial unit, which would then be the place. The gym is called Forza Barbell. I sold it in June of 2024, but from 2016 to 2024, it was going strong. I was running my business in that place. Me and eventually the best friend at the time, we were running the business together. I bought him out and I was doing it on my own. It was a personal training studio / barbell club. And I was crushing it, guys, crushing it. I was very successful, especially as a young man. I was putting away tons of cash. There was at least one shining light through this all. God placed it on my heart that if I'm broke by the time I'm 30, I had this idea. I had this image in my mind. I'm probably going to have a family by the time I'm 28, 29. So I should probably start stacking cash away. It's like one of the only good things that I've done. He still placed that on my heart. But in this time, you take that success, a guy that has no idea what to do with that success, a guy that, has now discovered this vanity, has come from some brokenness in these relationships. And I was going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole of sin, and so again, in and out of these really toxic relationships, I was smoking marijuana heavily. I'm not joking. I'm not exaggerating, guys. I got to the point where I was smoking like a quarter to a half a pound of marijuana per month. Okay. I mean, just so GAY, just what a Skittles thing to do. If you know what I mean? And, I remember getting into a relationship. This was like 2018, 2019. We come back from this vacation that blows up in my face because I was being really shady. And anyways, this is when the drinking began again, hard. Okay. This was right before the beer bug, the COVID fake pandemic. And so me and this person broke up. And let me just tell you, the deeper I went down the rabbit hole, and throughout this time, there were many weekends in a row where I'd be abusing, drugs up until very, 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 very early in the morning, drinking all night, doing blow, ketamine, you name it. And this just became, a regular thing. We would just drink our faces off at the gym. And that's where I would go. I wouldn't go to bars or clubs or whatever. I would just drink my face off at the gym, and we would be doing drugs. I'd be smoking, and it was just yeah, it was a whole rabbit hole and gamut of sin. Let's just put it that way. And so, and around this time, you know, I was starting to think, hey, like there was this echo in my heart. There was this voice, which I firmly believe is it was Christ's voice, because at that point it was really interesting. I looked at Christianity like Jordan Peterson looked at Christianity. I was really into Jordan Peterson at the time. That it was like a series of stories that tell you how to live a good and moral life, but it couldn't be taken literally and all this stuff. It may, it doesn't really make sense that it was literal, but you could take some good stuff from this, and live a decent life. Well, I was obviously very incorrect and very wrong about that. It was a very strange way to view Christianity. But the deeper I went in this experience, I started to think, this is precisely what the red pill had conditioned me to believe, that it's about stacking money, being ripped, fornicating. And the more that I would do this, the more I wanted to end my life, all the more. If you stare into the abyss long enough, it stares back at you. And I was confronted with this. I'm living in this way that so many guys I thought wanted to live, and here I am depressed. Is there something wrong with me? Well, looking back, I truly desired just to be loved by one woman, truly to have something special. We could grow together, have a family. I think it's woven in our DNA. Patriarchy is woven in our DNA. We either want to become priests over a flock, so the clerical, patriarchy is bimodal. So we either become priests and we care for the flock, or it's the household, the ecclesiola, the household patriarchy, where we are the protectors, the providers, the priest, prophet, king, etc. of the home. And I realized that's all I wanted. But I was used to living in such a way that I was enslaved to my carnal appetites. And there was a really interesting moment in 2019. I was doing third eye meditation for a period of time. And shortly thereafter is when my life just began to unravel. The drinking became insane. I started drinking, 3, 4, 5 bottles of 101 proof whiskey per week, still making strength gains somehow, still showing up to work somehow, but barely. Not sleeping, drinking all the time, just ripped with anxiety, wanted to end things. There was a point where I was doing the alcohol with the pills, and it was bad. It was bad. And so zoom ahead, it's early 2020, and I found a picture of my wife online on Instagram. She had competed in powerlifting. I was very well known in the powerlifting circles online. So I saw this picture, and being the degenerate that I was, I said, well, I gotta, I'm gonna try to get with this girl. So I ended up sending her a message, and we went back and forth. And it's funny, this is a piece of dating lore from my past, and I make fun of my wife all the time for it, bless her, that she canceled on me twice. She canceled on me twice. And I said, man, nobody cancels on me. I was so arrogant. And so anyways, ended up coming to be that she wanted to meet me, and we, to go out on this date. And I remember picking her up from the gym and then being confronted with the reality of, wow, this woman's incredible. This woman is way higher quality. I'm filthy. I'm disgusting. This woman is in love with Jesus Christ. She converted out of, being Druze. So people that understand, there's this faith that's, you can't convert into it. I think it originates in Lebanon, and it takes some teachings from different faiths. And so she was born in that family. She converted out. She was Hindu for a short period of time, and then she had this radical experience, this conversion experience, and it was into evangelical Protestant Christianity. I'm definitely going to get her on for a stream, because I think it'd be such an awesome story to hear from her, because she's kind of behind the scenes, and she holds it down for us here. And I know a lot of people want to hear from her, so we're definitely going to do that. She could tell it from her perspective. But anyways, we ended up meeting up, and I was confronted with the reality that, I had treated myself like such a cheap sexual object for so long, and other people, that's what I conditioned myself to believe. That's all I was worth, right? I'm a cheap sexual object and if I'm confronted with this high quality woman, I don't deserve her. So we dated for a period of time, and it went up in flames. I was just absolutely, I wasn't the best guy. Let's just put it that way. I knew she was quality. I knew she was somebody that I could absolutely marry. She had it in her heart that she's like, you and I are getting married. And I'll never forget. I'll never forget. I'm going to put it to you this way. I was still embroiled in this past relationship, and I've never cheated on her. Let me just put it to you that way. I've never cheated on Karen, even when we were dating. But she sat me down one morning and she said, "You need to go and ruin yourself and destroy your life to realize what we have. And that's what it's going to take. That's what it's going to take for you to learn." And I said, "Yeah, okay, like, whatever. Women say crazy stuff." So anyways, I went and did just that. This was right around the COVID thing. It popped off. So I was dealing with that on the business side. It was stressful. I kept my gym open. It was wild. I started to drink more, use more drugs, go further and down, deep down this rabbit hole. And all the while I was dragging her through the mud. I was doing all this stuff. I was still messaging her behind the scenes when I was high as a kite, super drunk. And she was always very gracious. She was always very kind. I knew she was praying for me. I knew she was praying for me. And, if it wasn't for those prayers, I don't know what would have happened. So we dated for a month. We broke up for a period of time through this 2020. I remember waking up hungover, just horrific. I wanted the sweet embrace of death. Okay. And this is thematic of my life, guys. Okay. This idea of self-deletion. Okay. And not gonna lie, I had a demonic experience a couple weeks ago where these thoughts started to come into my mind again. This thought of drinking came into my mind again. And by the grace of God, and by through praying and having a very faithful wife who urged me to pray, I said these deliverance prayers, and poof, it vanished. I did a video on this if you guys want to check that out. And immediately delivered from that by the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, not by my own strength. So I woke up this one morning in July and I said, "Hey, listen," I said, "I have no friends that are of the faith. I want to meet up with you and just talk about Jesus." And this was after this moment. My good friend Spiro, who's now Orthodox, love my homie. He sent me, and you guys should check this guy out too. He's a Protestant. His name is Sevin. He's a rapper, Christian rapper. Sevin, out of Northern California. And I remember listening to this song Sovereign, the remix, the night before, I believe, and I wept like a baby until like my tears were dry. Like it was just, and so it was the very next morning that I messaged her, and she was gracious enough to say, "Okay, yeah, let's meet up." I said, "Listen, you're the only like fervent Christian that I know. Can we please just meet up and talk about Jesus?" So we met up at Spirit Pacific Park in Vancouver. Little to know, less than a year later, we'd be married there. Foolishly, civilly, but still married. But we spoke, and she didn't have any intentions of getting back with me. I certainly had no intentions of getting back with her. But she knew I was trying to quit alcohol and clean my life up. So she said, "Hey, why don't we just hang out? You can get away from drinking. Let's just hang out." I said, "Okay." I was trying to unwire my brain from or rewire my brain from the red pill indoctrination. You can't be friends with women, etc. So I said, "Hey, listen, if the worst case scenario, I just gain a sister in Christ and she helps me get closer to my faith, then so be it. So be it." Okay. So we're hanging out. And I realized, man, the breadth of my mistake, the depth of my mistake. And I really fell in love with this woman. And she was always there for me in my darkest moments. And here she is supporting me again. And I saw her in a whole new light. And I said, "Man, Lord Jesus, like you're giving me another opportunity with this woman." And to think about my life without my wife, Karen, just pains me. It just rips me apart. That this diabolical influence, this demonic influence of the red pill and everything that I was going through, fornication, how much that sin darkens you. It just all sin darkens you, but this sin specifically, it darkened my intellect and my will in such a way that I didn't know anything. I thought I knew I didn't know anything. I was so darkened by it. And to think about my life without that woman just crushes me. But here I was with this opportunity, and we started dating again in August of 2020, and we were married May of 2021. So this is the next chapter begins, like serious Mike. So I'll never forget January. It was a week after, and this was so funny how this came true, because in my early 20s, I said, by the time I'm getting close to 30, I really think I'm going to become a father. I'm going to be married. Well, a week after my 28th birthday, my wife, she wakes me up, and this was before we were married, guys. So don't repeat these mistakes, please. Like, this is the whole point of me getting on social media, is like, you guys don't have to go through this. A lot of guys are like, "Yeah, it's easy for you to say you went through this experience, you did it, you experienced it all." I'm telling you, okay, if you sow seeds of sin, you will reap a harvest of wrath in your life. Okay. Just think about that again. If you sow seeds of sin, you will reap the harvest of wrath. You don't have to go through it this way. If I can be like the big brother or little brother you never had that just tells you, dude, just don't do this stuff. Let it be an example. Let me be a witness of like, just don't have to do these things. Okay. That's what I want to teach my children. That's what I want to help ultimately everybody with. So she woke me up. She was hovering above my bed and she said, wake up. And I said, man, what are you doing? Because I'm pregnant. I said, you're pregnant. And that's when life changed. We were married a couple months later, I should say. We dated for a total of like maybe 8 or 9 months. And then we were married, bought a home, bought a ring, bought a vehicle, moved in, did the whole thing. All the while, unfortunately though, still drinking. Not as heavily. It would kind of go in and out, but I was still drinking. On Fridays, I would hit it really hard. And there'd be some times when stress would really creep up because I was this was the peak of like COVID, all the vaccine stuff was coming out and I had refused to shut my gym down. I kept it open. I remember boarding up the walls, locking the door from the inside, having the facade that we're following the protocols, but like nobody was following the protocols. Like nobody was, I wasn't. And so I kept it open. And so now I had this idea. I'm like, man, I have a child on the way. I've got to provide. What am I doing? Like, this is crazy. Again, God guided us through. We purchased our first home. And Amadea, my first daughter, my little princess, she was born October the 11th, 2021. And I'll never forget, we didn't find out. Okay. We didn't find out her sex. So we were in the OR because my wife was in labor for almost 48 hours straight. And I remember them showing, they showed me like her little butt. And I didn't know that female private parts at birth are puffy. So to me, it looked like a scrotum. Okay. So I said, hey, it's a boy. And they said, no, it's a girl. And it was like a mirror was put up in front of my heart. I said, what am I going to do with a girl? Because at that time, I'm, despite saying that I was a Christian, I said, if I have a little boy, he's going to go and sow his wild oats like I did. I see, even at this point, okay, I was so dumb. I didn't realize the value of chastity. I didn't realize all that. So I said, yeah, my boy's going to live like his dumb father, but this girl's going to be put in the cage and she's going to be kept for her husband. What an asshole, And so I'll never forget, and this is hard for me to admit, I was kind of upset for a period of time. I was a little upset. My ego, that was the sound of like my ego just shattering on the floor everywhere. This little girl comes into my life. I love her with every part of my soul. Okay. And it effectively changed me. And so work went into warp speed. I was working 12 hours a day, providing, still doing well, supporting the home, etc. My wife was on maternity leave. She had a stay-at-home job. So it was kind of easy. I hadn't retired her at this point. And so I remember waking up. I'm a fan of rash decisions. Clearly, I had no prudence at the time, but this was, God brings good out of every evil or every, poor decision. He just reroutes the GPS, if you will. So I remember waking up first quarter of, 2022. This was, I think, January, February. I said, hey, listen, my wife was raised in Alberta and, I knew she was dealing with some postpartum pretty bad. My family was always there to support her, but we weren't in like the immediate vicinity, and she was kind of left alone. I was out of the house all the time, and she was alone with this child, learning how to be a mother, dealing with a husband who knew how to provide, but he wasn't protecting her spiritually. He wasn't providing for her spiritually. He was drinking. He was at some points very tyrannical, very unkind. That's who I was, and not ashamed to admit it. There is a sense of shame still there, but I've been delivered by it. I wasn't a good man. I wasn't a good husband. Okay. So I said, you know what? We're going to sell our home and we're going to build a house near your family so you have support. So okay, this is my kind of journey, because where my gym was is exactly where I grew up. So everybody knew me growing up. Were like, man, Mike's never going to leave East Van. He's going to stay here. His gym is here. His life is here. So I had made this decision. We had entertained this idea about a year prior, but I said, no, I put it kind of kiboshed it. And that was a grace too. So we purchased our first place in June of 21. We sold it February of 22. And again, divine timing. We bought at the bottom and we sold at the top. If anybody knows anything about Vancouver real estate, it's some of the most expensive real estate in the world. It appreciates like absolutely crazy. But the way that we timed it, the way that God timed it was perfect. So the proceeds that we made from that house sale went completely into this new build, this house that I'm in right now, by the grace of Jesus Christ. So I'm like, I'm going to put my family on my back. At the time, we only had one child. And this was when the next chapter began. And this was a even worse depression that I've ever gone through. I already told you guys about all this other stuff, and I know I'm rambling on and on. So I appreciate everybody that's stuck around this far. This is kind of just like setting the stage in case people don't know, who I am and where I've come from. Let it be an example. We moved into my in-laws. They have a small little duplex. They're older. They're in their 70s. We were staying in the basement while this house was getting built. And I had this whole idea. I said, okay, I was making really good money in Vancouver. And thank you, Become the Night. I really appreciate that, because sometimes I don't like talking too much about myself, but it's my YouTube channel. I'm like, what else am I to talk about at my first stream? So thank you very much for saying that. I appreciate it. I had secured this contracting job working as a nutrition coach, and it was such a blessing at the time that helped me transition, rebuilding some income. It wasn't the full bit, but I gave myself from June to September to rebuild a 6-figure plus income. Like, talk about like unnecessarily ballsy move. Okay. Like, I look back and said, man, what the heck was I thinking, dude? But God provided. God provided. I can't say that any louder. We move in. I'm still drinking, and now I am plunged into darkness more than I ever have before. I said, what am I thinking? This was a mistake, not just financially, but I don't have my family around. I'm in a geography that to me is like so jarring and ugly compared to like how majestic and beautiful British Columbia is. And I still hold that, like Vancouver, British Columbia, where I come from, is one of the most beautiful places on planet Earth. It's just, you're just surrounded by God's beauty and nature. But I wasn't able to see the beauty in where I am at now. There's so much beauty here. So much. And so again, okay, I was actually talking to, God bless her, my mother-in-law and my father-in-law, God bless them. Okay. They are immigrants from Lebanon, staunchly traditional, staunchly conservative, but they took us in while we had our daughter in the basement while this house was getting built. And I remember one day I came home from the gym and I was upset. I was depressed. I hated my life. I was drinking. I was hiding and drinking more and more and more every day. And I heard them arguing upstairs, and something snapped. Okay. Something snapped. I don't think I've ever told this story, and we were reflecting on it because we always joke about it, with my in-laws. And, they were reveling at how far I'd come. And she's like, had we not had that argument, you wouldn't be where you are now. Like, praise be to God. And so I went upstairs and I just lost it. I went berserk. I put holes in the wall. I was shouting at them, insulting them, saying all kinds of just obscene things to these elderly people that were nothing but kind to me. Okay. And it pains my heart to even reflect on that. They didn't know if I was going to become violent. My wife had to take my child out. It was one of those really, really tenuous, stressful, high tension situations. My brother-in-law, one of the best men that I know, love that guy to death. He comes over and we're about to fight. I could tell he didn't want to fight. I didn't want to fight him, but we were about to go to blows. Sister-in-law shows up, and it's this whole neighborhood ordeal. Everybody knows what's going on. Mike's losing his mind, putting holes in the wall, shouting, drunk out of his mind. Cops show up. But, Canadians are pretty nice. So these cops were pretty nice, but I had to leave. I was escorted away in a cop car. I mean, talk about while the neighborhood's watching. Like, talk about just like insane exit, right? Just dramatic. This is just like kind of like thematic of my whole life. And they take me to a local hotel. Well, get to the hotel, I pay whatever, I get into the room, and I call my wife, and I'm shouting at the top of my lungs. Within 20 minutes, I get kicked out of the hotel. To 20 minutes, they come knock at the door. You got to get out. All right. So I went to buy more booze, more cigarettes, and I'm chain smoking, drinking. And despite what had just happened, my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law picked me up, and I slept at their place. And so we moved from Airbnb to Airbnb to Airbnb in this like 3 or 4 month time. It was nightmarish. My wife got sick. Okay. She got so sick. She lost all this weight. She was like a rail, dealing with all this stress, having a newborn, or I guess, she was, my daughter was 6 or 7 months old at the time. And we finally take possession of this house. Okay. And it was about a month later that I started this social media page. I was working as a personal trainer. I was building up my business again. I was doing this online thing. And there was, again, this signal grace out of nowhere. And God was prompting me to start on Instagram. I said, okay. I remember one day telling my wife, hey, I want to start this man page. I remember talking about it in Vancouver. I just didn't have the time or the bandwidth to do it. I just want to help guys unplug from the red pill, quit pornography, stop the self-abuse stuff. So I don't know what the heck I'm doing, but let's do it. I'll never forget making an intro post with my goofy face. And it's like, I don't know. I don't know what I was thinking. And my whole goal, again, kind of circling back to the beginning of this conversation, was to just help one guy. And it brought me so much healing because I was going through it so bad still at this time. I was trying to live. I was getting closer to my faith, closer and deeper to my faith. Praise be to Jesus. It was around this time that I rediscovered my faith. I was church hopping, trying to find a place to kind of gain my footing back. I was reading scripture. I like proclaimed Jesus Christ. Would have died for my faith back then. Okay, much more now, but even back then, despite not knowing what the heck I was doing, I knew I loved Christ. I knew I loved Jesus. I knew I needed him. I knew without him, I was so foolish. And I got rebaptized. Okay, I got rebaptized. I'm pretty sure it was a valid baptism. Lord forgive me, because I was baptized in the Catholic Church. 2 or 3 days later, this is kind of around that time, the same week that I started this page, my wife had a horrific miscarriage. Horrible. We've had 2. This first one was just awful. I remember driving to the hospital. My wife was having contractions like she was giving birth, and we were waiting, and I'm just like, I don't even know what to think. And she goes to the washroom and she just screams, like this blood curdling scream. And I walk in, and there was, this little baby in a sack on the floor. There's blood everywhere, and I'm just beside myself. My wife is just, beside herself, and I hug her, and we're weeping together. And it's still really, it still pains me to think that we didn't give that child a just burial. It still affects me to this day, praise be to God for good priests. That's all I can say. Who recently prompted me to name those babies and to pray for them. And so anyways, we left, and that was one of those turning points in my faith. I wasn't mad at God. It made me, and I often think, I said, was this like a chastisement for getting rebaptized? And I said, God doesn't work like this. God doesn't work like this. And it still pains me to this day we didn't have this burial for this baby, but God brings good out of every evil, every bad thing that happens to us. And I just like to think that this baby's in the presence of Christ. Right now, the 2 that we've had in particular, and their names, we named them, Raphael and Miriam, after Saint Raphael the Archangel, and obviously after the Blessed Virgin Mary. And that's brought so much healing. And this was recent. This was like a month ago that he prompted us to do this. So praise be to God for good priests. But I was in awe of the power and the majesty of God. I was just, he has the ability to bring forth life from dust, and has the ability to snuff it out when he so chooses, according to his will. And this brought me much closer to my faith. I didn't abandon my faith. In fact, I went deeper. But I was misguided. Getting into this year, I was still drinking. I was depressed. There was even a time, I'm not going to lie, we kind of joke about it now, but I listed our house without telling my wife, and that was horrible. She was pregnant with our second. She was pregnant with Serafina, my second little girl, my other little princess. And it was a bad time. I put my wife through a lot, guys. And this was during this time I was still kind of doing the social media thing. Nothing really was coming out of it. I was going on podcasts, and I was getting kind of connected with other pages. It brought a great source of healing. I was connecting with other, Protestant men online, and there was a lot of goodness. I'll have to say, as bad as social media is, how bad of a rap it gets at times, it was a source of tremendous blessing. It's really what kept me going, posting and interacting with these people, having these opportunities to go on podcasts, the impact that it was having, even as a Protestant. It was like, I knew I had to keep going. I knew I had to keep doing it. And all the frustration and all the heartache and all the ideations of not wanting to live anymore, and all the drinking and the heartache, etc., I still decided to do it. God just put it on my heart. You need to keep doing this. You need to keep doing this. You're glorifying me. You need to keep doing this. And like, to think back now, having you guys here, having a business, having all these opportunities, I can't even like begin to explain how grateful I am. Like, to my core, how grateful I am. So zoom ahead to, summer, getting into the last quarter of 2023. September 1st hits, boom, my second little girl was born, Serafina. This is when things started to turn around. Okay, this is when things, for some reason, out of nowhere, life, there was some hope. And I remember so many times I was plagued by these demonic dreams where the demons would mock me endlessly for my belief in Christ. And I know it sounds kind of crazy and sensational, but now having the encounters that I've had, I believe that this diabolic taunting. Like, the devil knew what maybe I was going to go on to do, or was it what I was about to do, and how much glory I was going to bring Jesus, and how I was going to live my life as best as I could according with his precepts. And of course, coming back to the Catholic Church, which he hates more than anything, because it's the fullness of truth of our faith, of course, and soaking my Bible with tears, soaking it with tears. So this is when this whole process started. I know it's taking me an hour to get here, and I'm going to get through the rest. I don't want to ramble too much longer here. But there was a couple key moments here, and all this heartache, and taking my wife, just putting her through the just awful times. Serafina was born. Amadea was 2 years old at the time, and I remember we were going to this charismatic church, and there was a couple things. One, I remember distinctly thinking, where's Mary? So now my Catholic upbringing was starting to come back. So as poorly catechized as I was, I at least knew who the Blessed Virgin Mary was. I at least remember my great-grandmother praying the rosary. I at least remember having images of the saints and Padre Pio and St. Michael and the Blessed Virgin Mary everywhere. And I started to think, I said, well, this is strange. Could it have been just any woman that gave birth to our Lord? It's impossible. No. This is just some woman. They just kind of gloss over her. Yeah, he was born in a manger, and Joseph with Mary was there. Anyways, it was so odd. And then the second moment, the monthly communion service, and I've told this story probably 100 times, but I was looking down at this, like, it was like a little cup with a little cracker at the top, and it was literally grape juice. And people, we're going to drink the blood and consume the body of our Lord. And I remember this visceral feeling of disgust one time. What is this? Like, what is this? This is Jesus? And then we're taking this little cup and we're just throwing it in the trash can? Like, what are we doing? I didn't know what transubstantiation was. I didn't know what this meant. I didn't know what the Eucharist really was. I remember taking communion as a kid, but this was bizarre to me. And I remember one moment thinking to myself, all this focus on material provision, and I don't even know why I believe what I believe. God just, boom. Your most important job, young man, your most important job is guiding the souls of your family to heaven. And Ryan, glory be to Jesus Christ that you had that realization too. It's funny how he speaks to us in a similar way. There's just something in us, like it's as if God, the truth of Jesus is written on our hearts, and he gives us these little glimpses, these little graces, when really it's his hand extending outwards, like, hey, like, I know you're dumb, but I'm right here. You're my lost sheep. I want to bring you back in. And that's what happened. I had this realization that I was focusing too much on material provision and not enough on spiritual provision. I didn't actually know, okay, what do I actually believe? I didn't know what Protestantism even was. I said I was a Bible-believing, non-denominational Protestant. Like, what does that mean? What does it mean? I wanted to get to the heart of what that meant, because when faced with conversations with other Catholics, I had no idea how to defend my position. Okay, I had no clue how to defend my position. So I dug into history. I read the patristics. Shout out to Joshua Charles, Eternal Christendom blog, when I read about the early church fathers. And I read St. Ignatius of Antioch, and that was kind of that light bulb moment where I said to myself, okay, this guy was around in like 130 AD. He was a disciple of John, from my understanding. And he wrote the epistle to the Smyrnians, talking about, those that where there is the bishop, there's the Catholic Church. And if you deny the Eucharist, you're a heretic. I said, well, I'm not a heretic. What does that mean? So my intellect was converted at that moment. I said, okay, well, there's this truth of this visible body, this mystical body of Christ here on earth, that he would make it very obvious what his church is. Not some obscure church where you'd have to justify it by being a historical scholar. That there's this visible hierarchy, this visible patriarchy, this visible body of Christ. And within that, these sacraments needed for our salvation. I said, okay, well, there's my intellect was immediately converted. I still didn't know what to do. And then I encountered the Holy Rosary. You know, it's the feast day of Our Lady of the Rosary. So of course, or the Rosary. So I need to, of course, I mean, this is instrumental. Glory be to God. My mother-in-law bought this rosary, and I wasn't Catholic at the time. She went to Turkey. They loved going to Turkey. They were in Istanbul, and they were at, I believe, St. Anthony of Padua's cathedral. And they bought this rosary that was just hanging on my thermostat forever. It was just hanging there. And I was one of those guys who are like, you can't have a cross. That's a whatever second commandment violation or whatever the Protestants say about that. But I had this rosary up there. It was very sentimental because I remember growing up with the rosary or hearing the rosary being recited in the house. And I said one night, I said, okay, I'm going to pray this. I don't know how to pray this. I don't know. I don't know how to pray this, but I'm going to pray this. So I sat down in this stairwell right here. I put on Jonathan Rumi's silky smooth voice on Hallow, and I prayed the rosary for the first time. And all this anxiety, all this depression that I felt at the time, just like kind of just disappeared for a moment. My lower faculties just calmed down. And seeing Christ through the eyes of his mother, I was already converted up here. She reached down and just like grabbed my heart. And that was it. So that was it. I said, I'm converted. I'm a Catholic. I'm coming back to the Catholic faith. And that's it. So I remember telling my wife, and she was like, what does that mean? What does that mean? And I went about it in the dumbest way possible. You started talking about early church fathers and St. Thomas and St. Augustine. And I was in it. Well, all that did was make her feel stupid. So it didn't really do anything. It wasn't productive. Okay. And in fact, it pushed her away from her faith because now she felt dumb. Her husband now, because she's known me to be an erratic guy that makes these decisions. She's like, oh, Mike's going through another phase again. And I'm like, no, babe, like this is real. This is the truth. You know, it's the pearl of great price. Like here, I want to share this with you, but I was sharing with it in a terrible way. Until I realized, I said, listen, my witness, how I go about living my life as a Catholic is going to convert her, not the church history stuff. Men are intellectually converted, and their heart is converted. For women, their hearts are converted and their intellects are converted. And it's beautiful how there's such interplay between those. You know, men are converted in one way, women are the other. I started to become more patient, kinder. I had this joy, this inexplicable peace that came from, you know, those early reversion consolations. God just knows how to hook you in, right? Because the desolate periods come, the dry periods come, they come and they come hard. But he pulls you in. He pulls you in and he holds you so close. And I was showered with consolation, guys. Showered. I was still drinking at this time, and then I'll never forget. I remember thinking back. I said, my great-grandmother used to abstain from fish on Fridays. She did this her whole life. She came up very traditional in the faith. So I said, okay, I have struggled so many times to quit alcohol. So I've tried, and then I've relapsed. I would try, and then I would relapse. I'd go maybe a week. But this time there was like this beautiful clarity. I prayed the rosary, and it was like the Blessed Virgin Mary put it on my heart and said, your great-grandmother did this. You need to abstain. It was the hardest day for me to break was Friday. If I could break Friday, I could break the habit. What a grace that they did full circle. God bless grandparents that pray the rosary. Like God bless grandparents that pray the rosary. And I said to myself, I think the Blessed Virgin Mary is prompting me to quit alcohol on Fridays for her son. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to do just that. We'll see what happens. Poof, gone. How does that happen? If that's not some kind of divine intervention and grace, how the heck does that happen? I don't know. All I know is it was effortless. Gone. This demon that had possessed me for so long, that I had allowed to possess me for so long, seemingly vanished after praying the rosary and having this like signal grace put on me. Cameron, absolutely, brother. The rosary crushes addiction. Praise be to Jesus Christ. This is so true. This is so true. And this is also not to say that those of you that are still struggling with addiction that do pray the rosary, that you're any less of a Catholic or Christian than I am, or that Cameron is. You're absolutely, like, you still are. The way that I look at it is this: there's certain things that are still a struggle for me, and God hasn't given me the graces to overcome those things, because I think there's a risk of us abandoning him if we think that we can do it on our own. So these struggles he allows us. I mean, St. Paul talked about a thorn in his side, even throughout. He's the most prolific writer of the New Testament, and he had this thorn in his side the entirety of his ministry. And so if he's struggling with something, you're still struggling with something. He wants to sanctify you through that. There are other things that I still struggle with. Not addictions necessarily in this such way that are, destructive in that sense, or self-abuse by the, grace of God. But he's walking you through a path, and it's hard. It's hard. I remember having a conversation with ex-SEAL Team 6 Gold Squadron member Dom Razzo, one of the most badass dudes on the planet, talking about how the hardest thing that he's ever done is be a good Catholic. And this was very validating to me. So I said, okay, I'm not just like pontificating for no reason. This actually does make sense how difficult it is. So those of you still going through it, you're going through it for a reason, and it's your sanctification, and you're bringing him glory in your suffering. May he be glorified in your humiliation and in your struggle. Upon seeing all this, we were going to mass. My wife was so gracious. She didn't know, but she's like, I'm going to go to mass with you. She saw me receive the sacrament of confirmation, May 7th, 2024. I'll never forget. I called the parish because they'd seen me going, and I'd come to know the priest fairly well. We had a couple meetings, and he understood that I was like, I had kind of catechized myself into the faith. They said, you want to get confirmed? I said, either I was going to do that, or real quick, I want to answer this question here. Did you notice your depression subsiding a bit after pursuing a well-ordered purpose? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the depression still comes in and out. It's still a thorn in my side, but I know what to do prudentially. Virtue is a habit. And so it doesn't matter how you feel, things got to be done. Understanding the virtue of justice keeps my prayer life in order. It's not perfect all the time, but I understand that, like, no matter what I'm getting from God in my prayer life, it doesn't matter what I'm getting. I'm rendering God what he is owed. And that's my time, my love, my attention, my adoration. So yes, my depression absolutely subsided after pursuing a well-ordered purpose that was aligned perfectly with God. And, don't hold out hope on the outcome for something like this. She's going to come on. She'll share her point of view. I don't want to give anybody any kind of false hope. The only hope that you have is in Christ. And if he's meant to deliver your ex-boyfriend from this and bring him back, then he will. But you have to attach yourself to him and detach yourself from the outcome. We have so many attachments, guys. Okay. And the way that we really inherit, a piece of the beatific vision here on earth, I don't think striving for purgatory is good enough. We have to strive for a state of perfection before we reach the gates of heaven, before we reach our particular judgments. And so we need to rid ourselves of these attachments. I don't say that in a callous way, because I'm sure, it's very difficult. And my boy, Mike Brady, what do you think triggered the recent attacks and drive you had to drink again? So there's external stressors that I was dealing with business wise, which they're not uncommon. But I firmly believe, so I had quit smoking cigarettes some time ago, and I was using nicotine pouches, and I feel ashamed to admit this. You guys can roast me for this. Please roast me for this. I started vaping. So I was like, I'm going to get off the cigarettes. I'm going to start. This is going to be a bridge for me here to quitting. And it stuck around for about a year, 10 months. And so I firmly believe that this attachment that I started to associate with everything, I was abusing it. In the back of my mind, it was just gnawing at me. You got to quit this. And so I firmly believe this was kind of like an entry point, this attachment that I had that was kind of like alcohol, although I was keeping faculty of mind and sobriety of mind. It wasn't something that I thought was like necessarily bad, but it was an attachment. So when these things came on, I firmly believe I just finished the Our Lady of Sorrows novena. She was pointing me in the direction of penance. You need to practice penance. But I didn't want to give this up, but I knew that I had to. So I had this attack. I said these deliverance prayers out of Father Ripperger's book. I blessed myself with exorcised holy oil. Gone. Went out to vape again, and they came back. Boom, anxiety came back. Did the prayers, boom, they were gone again. So what did that tell me? I got to quit. And it was that night that I quit. It was that night that I quit. So real talk, I use nicotine pouches as help to kind of take the edge off, but that's just a means to an end, and pray that that doesn't become an attachment for me as well. And Ryan, yeah, dude. Yeah, just super GAY, bro. Super GAY. God bless you too, Rodrigo. It's hard. It is hard, but let me say something real quick too. And thank you, Peter. That was the plan. It's difficult. All part of God's plan. You're right. You're absolutely right. Rodrigo, real quick. The answer is simple one. I kind of cut straight to the chase when it comes to a lot of this advice. Remember, brother, God has given you a will. You have a will. Okay. You could say all the prayers, the consecrations, what have you. But if you do not move your will and assent your intellect and your will to meet the truth of chastity that God has proposed to you, and understanding that you need to rid yourself of this habit, you will never rid yourself of this habit. This is why natural virtue and marrying it to supernatural grace in the confessional by staying in a state of sanctifying grace, growing in holiness through penance and prayer, in addition to fasting, being temperate with your diet, lifting weights, doing things that are physically difficult, growing in these natural means of virtue, will allow you to quit this. But at the end of the day, when the temptation comes and the devil's at the door, you've got to move your will to say no. And I think a lot of people overcomplicate their issues. And it's not to say that I don't have sympathy to people that are in it, that have addictions. Dude, I have an addictive personality. It takes active participation in the pursuit of temperance for me to not be addicted to things. Okay. But you've got a will. You move your will to defeat this thing, and you will defeat it by the grace of God. Oh man, become the night. Thank you. Wow. That's very generous. God bless you, brother. I really appreciate it. Man, how do you balance fasting with dietary needs? For lifting, I want to do 48 hours, but I'm afraid I'll screw up my strength. Yeah. So you have to choose one or the other. You have to understand that, you're not going to be your strongest if you're regularly fasting, but it doesn't matter. Because let me tell you something. I had a recent experience with this too. I got really, really, really lean for my Mexico trip earlier this year. And thank you. Become the night. Thank you. The super chats. That means so much to me. So much to me. You have to understand that holiness comes above these physical pursuits. And this was a struggle that I had. I got really, really lean for this Mexico trip. I got like single digit body fat. And then I started to feel the vanity start to creep up again. I went to Mexico and I wasn't overeating. I'm not joking. Crazy experience. Within a day or two, I went from shredded to like I was fat again. I had this inflammation, water retention, and everything. I swear this was God humbling me, because when I came back within 2 days, I was back to my previous condition, but I felt horrible for the duration of this trip. It was still a lovely trip. And what he taught me in that was that you are becoming vain. You are putting these goals above me. So now I know it's not virtuous for me to be super lean. So I actually have been gaining weight, and that kind of is at odds with fasting. Understand that the graces that you get through fasting are going to be greater than any gain you can get in the gym. And you can still make gains in the gym while fasting, so long as your, pre-workout nutrition, your intra-workout nutrition is sound, your rest is sound, etc. So we can talk more about that in future streams, but, kind of give you a rundown. Prioritize the spiritual life first. Energy drinks, bro. I know, man. I feel you on that. Any advice from experience for those of us still waiting to join the church, especially given that we're not able to avail ourselves of confession? Well, from my understanding, catechumens receive graces too. So, I mean, God forbid you were to pass away in the state that you are as a catechumen. God understands that. Remember, guys, like God's mercy and his love extends outside of the boundaries of the sacraments, outside of what we know from the catechism. It's not something that we should roll the dice on, of course. Like, oh, God's ultimately merciful. He is. But like, as you grow in knowledge, like you grow in grief, and you will be judged according to what you know. Keep going through the process. Live as if you are a full-fledged Catholic. Pray your rosary, do your penances. If you can't go to confession, say, active contrition, whenever you can, and still try to, make that effort to grow in holiness. I have a book next to me that I think will bless so many people. Many people have already heard about this. Is The Imitation of Christ by Thomas A. Kempis. So definitely check that out. And just live like you're a Catholic, man. Live like you're a Catholic, and become the night, dude. Absolutely, yeah. Anytime. again, I want to emphasize that point, not to like, make light of your super chat. I really appreciate it, but holiness and your state of sanctifying grace and you growing in that in sainthood matters more than your gains. And you'll find that, once you kind of go through a season of not fasting, you're just going to get stronger than you ever had before anyways. God gives you the graces to do that too, because what? You're seeking him first and you're seeking all these other things second. And it's really easy to get caught up in the strength gains. I was there before too, with some of the things that I've pursued in the gym. But really now I just give glory to God. It's a way for me to practice penance and a way for me to really connect with God on a deeper level going through this. What do you do to avoid the possibility of false sexual harassment during the heat of time of the Me Too movement as a young Catholic male trying to court women? Well, I mean, I think that time of the Me Too movement, I think was peaked around 2014, 2015, 2016. I think if you're prudent and you're practicing temperance and you're not doing anything that I put it like this: don't do anything with a woman that you wouldn't do in front of a witness or in front of family. I mean, that'll pretty much nail it down. And you'll get a good idea if a woman's kind of that inclination and if she's kind of got the crazies, and you'll steer away from that. I don't think that's going to happen. I just don't think it's going to happen. I think we've moved past that climate. Just don't do anything that's over the top, anything that's obviously sinful, and don't do anything you wouldn't do in front of witnesses. So yeah, to go back to the confirmation experience. Oh, here's Become the Night again. My man, dude, thank you so much. Thank you. Any chance we can get you? I think it's either. Okay, so, man, I'm so glory to Jesus Christ once again. Kyle Whittington, actually, I don't know if I can actually formally announce this. Maybe he'll slap me on the hand. Long story short, I will be there in God willing, if it's still on next year at the Catholic Creator Conference in Steubenville. So I will be there alongside my boy Keith Nestor, and apparently we'll be doing something together. So if any of you here are a Catholic Creator and you're going, please go. I'd love to meet any and all of you that go. Got invited. I mean, these opportunities, like I said, these things that are like, absolutely, dude, I'm very much looking forward to. Introduce yourself via DMs if you're on YouTube right now, it looks like, but if you're on X or on Instagram, shoot me a DM, man. I really appreciate the support tonight, brother. It means a great deal to me. Your questions and your super chats mean a lot. So absolutely, I'll see you then. And so, I mean, I feel like I can go forever on this. If you guys are all right, let's see. I'm aware I've had that happen to me multiple times, even trying to be respectful. I do admit I came a long way socially, for I'm autistic. My man, I feel like every other person nowadays is dealing with some kind of like a autism of some kind. I don't mean to make light of your situation, of course. You can do it, bro. You absolutely can do it. This is what I mean, okay? Don't be a pencil neck trad. Don't be gluttonous, overweight fool. Live your faith. First and foremost, above all, a robust interior life is the most important thing. Staying in a state of grace, going to confession, etc. But get to the gym, build some natural virtue as well, okay? If you're a pious, holy, strong man, like those men of yesterday, early Christendom, think about the early Crusaders, Richard the Lionheart, Skanderbeg, Ferdinand, Louis. These are guys that were physical specimens, and they were also like monastic warriors. And another thing too, I know what you mean by this, but please, guys, I know it's difficult, but please don't be a doomer. Please don't be a doomer. Have hope. Our faith is based off of hope. Okay. One of the theological virtues, hope. Okay. Don't be a doomer. And if you're dealing with solitude and it's hard, dude, I totally hear that. Again, all of these things are crosses, and rigid and heavy is the weight of the cross. Okay. Embrace it as much as you can. Detach yourself from the outcome. And this is another thing that in doing the Our Lady of Sorrows Novena last year, 2024, she revealed to me how greedy I was with finances. I didn't want to face this. There was like these multiple things that happened without going to get into detail, because I've talked about myself endlessly. I want to help you guys now, but I needed to be more charitable and give back to the church. So I've started to do that, started to be more generous and with my finances. And guess what? More finances have come my way by the grace of God, without effort. So if you detach yourself from the outcome, you detach yourself from this idea of finding somebody, you more than likely will end up with somebody. Okay. Okay. JP, man, thank you, brother. Thank you so much, man. This support is just incredible. So I want to get to a couple messages here, but God bless. I really need to hear all this. I struggle so much with despair to the point where I feel like God isn't there anymore. I seem to know of God intellectually, but not spiritually. Brother, you know what, man? I thank you, first of all, for the support, and thank you for sharing this. Listen, I'm no theologian. I'm just a guy, not to quote Taylor Marshall, but I'm just a dad with a webcam, to quote Taylor Marshall. Okay. My understanding, if you are in despair, God is drawing you closer to him. Okay. You are his son, whom he is well pleased with. Okay. You belong to him. He wants you to love him completely. And so if you're going through despair and you're not going through, listen, Father Ripperger, and this is something that sticks to my mind, is that if you're going through a period of great consolation, you're at like the rudimentary level of your faith. I myself, to lend some relatability here, I am going through a bit of a dry period, a desolate period, where I don't feel like my prayers are heard. But what does that mean to me? To me, it feels like I'm being drawn inward more to God, more interior reflection, more silence with God. And I urge everybody, and man, nothing reveals my effeminacy more than this, okay, is I find it very hard to meditate, okay? If you're in despair, if you're struggling with this, please, you know, I'm not a spiritual director, a spiritual advisor, so please run this by one if you are working with one. Meditation, silent meditation with God, all the saints had this in common. And there's no question as to why. You know, if you can't pray, if you don't pray, you won't be saved. But more than vocal prayer, going inward and truly going interior, I think is the source of overcoming these struggles. So JP, thank you for the support. And I hope that helps at least a little bit, man. I'll pray for you. Send me a DM if that helps you, and I'll help you out, brother. But I would urge you to meditate more, go inward. Hello, Mike. My name is Josh. If you find your channel not too long ago, it's really helped me. I'm a 38-year-old disabled married man, father of 2 children. I was confirmed Catholic at 20. Glory to Jesus Christ, man. Josh, God bless you, brother. God bless you, man. I don't know what it's like living with a disability, obviously, but you've got probably many graces that I don't have. So God bless you and God bless your family, dude. And thank you for the comment. Become the night. My question would be how often do I pray? So kind of give you a rundown of how much I pray, what my prayer life looks like. As soon as I open my eyes in the morning, it's a sign of the cross, offering up all the joy, the sorrow, the happiness, the stressful moments to God, asking for his help and not sinning. And I say, Our Father, Hail Mary, glory be. And then I go about my day. And then before I work, so I come down, drink my water, get my coffee prepared, and then I read a page out of my daily devotional. So the day to day with St. Joseph and a day to day with St. Augustine. Both these books. And shout out to Jerry Keepers in the chat. I want to highlight her and her rosaries and her business. What a beautiful human. She actually sent me this in addition to an insane amount of rosaries. Actually, in fact, I'm going to do another giveaway because I still have some of these rosaries she's given me to give away. So what a beautiful reminder, Jerry. God bless you and your family. You have blessed us so tremendously, but more on that because I'm going to highlight one of her comments here in a second. The day-to-day St. Augustine, day-to-day St. Joseph devotionals. I come down and I pray for my family. And then at 6, 12, and 6, we pray the Angelus together. I bless myself before meals. You know, I try to stay as prayerful as I can throughout the day. And so that kind of fills the middle of my day with prayer. We always do, without fail, a daily rosary. So there's a rosary with my family. And a lot of times I'll do an additional rosary. And if I'm not doing an additional rosary, I'll do some kind of meditation. I'm not going to lie, guys. It's never perfect. Like I don't do these things. I do 99% of these things every day. But the second rosary, I don't always do. There's some times where I just don't do it, and I should be ashamed of myself. And the meditation happens a lot of the time, not all the time. But I do the Angelus, the morning prayers, the prayers with my family, the blessing before meals. And then in the evening, I'll spend another 20 to 30 minutes in prayer. So probably about 45 minutes to an hour in prayer total. And I'll go through I do an ongoing St. Joseph novena. I feel like every father has to have a devotion to St. Joseph. Okay. So I do a St. Joseph. I have a devotion to St. Joseph. I do the deliverance prayers out of Father Ripperger's book every single night. I pray for my family. I pray for any individuals that have prayer requests. I do an act of contrition. And that's when I'll usually do my meditation and my additional rosary, or, in the last, I guess, day or two, there was unfortunately my friend's wife has passed. I've been doing a Divine Mercy chaplet for my friend's wife. So about 45 minutes to an hour a day in prayer, generally speaking. So Jerry Keepers, I have to say that you have blessed us so much. So Jerry has maple and hemlock rosaries Okay, check her out on Instagram, check her out on Twitter if you're looking for a rosary. These are beautiful rosaries. She makes them from home. And something about Jerry that's just incredible. Okay, so she listened to my podcast on Pints with Aquinas, and I believe some content by Tim Gordon, my good friend and the godfather of my youngest daughter, him and Steph Gordon. She listened to this and she quit her job and is now working, or she's now full-time mom making rosaries at home. Glory to Jesus Christ. Like, what a story that is. I take no credit in that at all. The fact that I had even the most minuscule impact on that kind of change with her family. I believe, Jerry, you have 5 kids. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then she sent me the most ridiculous care package I've ever seen. This box was, I've received a lot of stuff. Okay. Incredible. I'm so blessed. It's so insane. This giant box, not just with these rosaries, but individual packages for not just me, that had the St. Joseph devotional, the manual for men by 10 books, a birthstone rosary for the family with each of our birthstones in sequence, a rosary for me, a Benedict medal, and different packages with different little goodies for each of my daughters, my son, and my wife, plus like 15 rosaries to give away, of which I've given away a couple. Jerry, God bless you. And I pray that, and a couple books and shirts for my kids. This was incredible. So please, if you are looking for a new rosary, okay, if you want to buy a new rosary, please go and check out Maple and Hemlock Rosaries. Support Jerry. She's a beautiful person and she's got an incredible business. Like, thanks be to God. Jerry, I can't rave enough about your stuff. Please go check out her stuff. Yeah, this is the thing, dude. There was one thing that really I knew I had to, the leap of faith I had to make was like, you just have to make this intellectual assent. You may not even know what you're assenting to, but you know it's good. You just got to take the leap of faith, brother. You don't have to always understand. You just got to take that leap and understand God's going to guide you the rest of the way. It's like walking a tightrope in the dark and your hands are on Jesus' shoulders. You just got to trust. Do the surrender novena as well. That's such a beautiful one. That's got me through many, many moments of struggle. Yeah, I just did that. Ike, I hope I pronounced that correctly. So hopefully that was valuable to you. I definitely feel that, but let me tell you right now, Christ does amazing things. Just keep being a witness and keep living your faith, keep being a witness to your faith, and these things will transform their hearts. I mean, I'm seeing it happen in my own family. So please continue, brother. Okay. Peter, with the great advice, try meditating in adoration. Please do that. Please do that. Yeah, you got to force yourself to do it. It doesn't matter how you feel. It matters what you're rendering to God. Yeah, sorry, become the night. I'm losing track of these. Praise God. One of the best homilies I've heard was about the mercy of God's silence. Abraham didn't hear from the Lord for 14 years from the birth of Ishmael and the announcement of Sarah's pregnancy with Isaac. Yeah, we don't realize how good we have it, and how effeminate, even myself, I still am, so most definitely. I hear you, man. Again, this is where prayers of prudence and temperance and understanding how to discern, and understand certain women is very, very important. It's hard to, again, a lot of guys want this stuff like really spelled out, and I understand it comes from a good place, but God will give you the wisdom and knowledge to discern. And Mike, I do a lot of the morning prayers before they wake up. And then I always, there's another thing I forgot. I always bless my family with exercise holy oil or holy water every day. It was a practice I got into a little while ago, and something that came to mind too is that the best, and this was echoed by my friend Father Rehill, the best offense or the best defense is a good offense. So don't just practice spiritual warfare when the devil has breached the lines. Fight him actively. Bless your family. Bless them daily. Pray over them daily. Pray these particular prayers over them daily. Make sure that you're in a state of grace at all times, because you have the ability to dispose them to grace and confer grace to them. And similarly, when you're not in a state of grace, you can dispose them to all sorts of disorder as well. This is why it's so important that a man gets right with God first. And that was a big part of my reversion too. Haven't read the Glories of Mary yet. I heard it's really, really good. And look who's in the chat. My beautiful wife. Hi, Karen. She's upstairs, probably cleaning the house. Let me just tell you real quick, okay? This woman does not sleep. My wife is made out of something different. If I don't get like 5-6 hours of sleep, I'm a bit of a baby. This woman doesn't sleep. She'll sleep on the floor when my girls need her in the room. She's up with the newborn. I want to help. Hey, I want to help, but she wants to do it all. And she does it all. And she every morning when I wake up, my house is in like perfect order, like show home condition every single day. This I'm like I said, and Karen, you'll hear me gloating and not gloating about you, but being so grateful about you earlier on in the stream. It'll probably make you cry if you aren't already crying right now. So I love you so much. Thank you, Jerry. I'm gonna keep up with these. This is amazing. No, I don't train any martial arts. I did for a long time Muay Thai, and I did some wrestling. So I gotta get back to that. It's actually been on my heart to get back to that. And then here we go. My mother. I love you, Mom. I talked a lot about you as well. In fact, Mama is tattooed on my arm like a good Italian boy. Okay. I got all the classical, stereotypical Italian tattoos all over my body. And one of them is my beautiful mother. So God bless you. I love you so much. She's the best. And I'm going to see her in a couple weeks. Glory be to God. Yeah, I love you, Mom. We are Karen Stans. I know, right? Who isn't? She's awesome. Wife is so good. Okay, Dylan Monks PTA. Hey, Mike, what would your advice be about choosing the right partner? I'm not sure if I'm searching for a fantasy. I have dreams about. Look at my mom. What a sweetheart. I love you so much. Finding a good partner. Ensure she loves God more than she loves you. That she's pious. That she's got a kind. She's kind of effervescent. That's what attracted me to my wife, was that she was just had this like bubbly, positive, optimistic, loving spirit. You know, she was kind to everybody. She loved Christ above everything else. And, you know, she had all the hallmarks of being able to take care of a home and being traditional minded. I'm going to say something real quick to a lot of the guys out there. A lot of guys, and I understand, you know, want this picture perfect, like trad wife, right? The thing is, right, and this is the problem with the brokenness of culture. When we meet when we're older on, and when we're older in life, let's say mid, late 20s, early 30s, we come with a lot of baggage. And if we're not willing to meet somebody where they're at, then how can we expect anybody to meet us where we're at? And so you kind of create this shared vision together, and you guys can be a great source of sanctification for one another. So, you know, obviously don't go digging in the trash and going to pubs and bars and swiping on Tinder to find these women. But she's going to be imperfect like you are. And it's about kind of creating a vision together and growing together in holiness, but she's got to love Christ. She can't obviously be a fanatical, left-leaning, liberal, purple-haired feminist. Like, just don't do that. You know, you're not gonna be able to change a woman like that. And yeah, I just wouldn't waste my time with that. So, Spiro, my dude, I actually mentioned you early on in the stream, brother, that you recommended 7. And that it was a big reason of why I reached out to Karen, my man, Spiro. I'm actually gonna be in Vancouver in a couple weeks, bro. Let's link up, my guy. This guy's also a beast in the gym. Spiro, I love you, brother. Thank you for popping in. It means so much, dude. Yeah. So I'm also in the talks with coming and doing a speaking event in Tennessee next year. So Become the Night, and everybody that's in Tennessee, stay tuned for that. Because I think that's going to happen in 2026, Lord willing. I am going to be speaking at the Terror of Demons 2 men's conference in is it Phoenix? It's in Arizona next November. So any of you guys that are in Arizona or close, I know Cameron Riker is. So definitely check it out. And yes, absolutely, I am a TLM stan. You know, fairly recently, you know, we've been going now for almost 6 months straight. I went to the TLM. I'll never forget that first experience in May of 2024. And it kind of took us, it was a windy road getting here, but by the grace of God, we made it. Okay. So here's some more dating lore from me and my wife. Okay. Do you think it's okay to date someone that's 4 years older? I'm 25. She's 29. I'm pretty settled in my career. She's a God-fearing woman. We have a good connection. Yes, but you've got to be twice the man, brother. Okay. Because it's going to be hard to escape the fact that you are younger than her. But let me tell you, my wife is older than me. She's older than me. She's 6 years older than me, 6.5-ish years older than me. And while a lot of people on paper would say, oh, that's not ideal, I knew what I was rolling the dice on, and it paid off in spades. So don't look down on women. We've often talked about this. Like, obviously, it'd be ideal if I was older than her, you know, because it just, you know, in a way, it's more rightly ordered, I suppose. But had I not rolled that dice, I wouldn't have 3 beautiful children, a beautiful household. And I knew exactly, guys, don't listen. When I was on my first date with my wife, I knew immediately that this woman was going to be a good wife. Don't ignore that. Okay. And this is why you've got to stay away from fornication, because you can't paint red flags green, my guy. And when you start thinking with your little head and you start doing all kinds of crazy stuff, you're going to try to make a trad wife out of somebody that's very much not a trad wife, nor does she aspire to be a trad wife. Okay. So I don't pretend to be the perfect image of what a trad person is. But if you saw our lifestyle, you would not think anything but that. The fruits of our family, how well ordered our family is, by the grace of God. Was it harder for me? Yeah, of course. Again, you have to be twice the man to lead a woman that's slightly older than you. But is it possible? It's absolutely possible, dude. It's absolutely possible. So I wouldn't frown down upon that. Just, you got to have certain things in order. And yes, dude, become the night. I'm definitely coming to your TLM. This has been more fun than I thought it was going to be. I feel like I could absolutely just like keep going. I was going to do some Q&A from Instagram, but I feel like you guys had such tremendous questions. I'm probably going to go for another, 5-ish, 10 minutes. If you guys got other questions, I'm happy to answer them while I'm still on here. But like I said, I could feel like I could ramble on forever. Think with your big head, not your little head. Dude, guys, if you guys haven't already listened to that or watched that video of mine, just stop gooning. Okay. Stop gooning. That's it. Stop gooning. If you start thinking with your big head and you don't goon and you prevent yourself from gooning, you can identify the good women. Just please stop gooning in all seriousness. But yeah, so moving forward, I'm going to do these every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, which apparently to a lot of people isn't a real time zone, which fair enough. So 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central. I'll be doing it every Wednesday. So again, Dylan, she's open to it. Yeah, you know what, man? You can absolutely convert somebody that's not a Christian as long as she's open to it, And I feel for you guys. I definitely feel for you guys in this climate. If I were to be honest with you, this would probably be a deal breaker for me too. So it's a little bit harder. But again, in prudence, in being wise and fearing God, where does wisdom come from? Fearing God, keeping his commandments, ultimately. So you'll be able to know if it's worth rolling the dice on, so trust God. Ryan, sobriety and being clean is a gift from God. Indeed it is. It's a miracle that I was even able to make this stream work, even especially cross platforms. It's I have no idea what I'm doing with technology, but I'm just so glad that it worked out. So guys, thank you everybody for the super chats and for the questions in general. What's up, my dude? Italian Batman. I know, dude. What's your handle on Instagram again? I forgot, but I know, dude, I know who you are. You got in the stream on time. Praise be to Jesus. Mike, thank you for the videos you post. They're so helpful. I'm the oldest of my siblings and never had someone to look to for advice in the faith. You become like an older brother to me. Dude, come on, man. Come on, dude. Make me all these comments, dude. My heart is welling up with so much joy. God bless you, Tristan. You're going to be a powerful witness for your family. And who knows, your faith, your practice of faith, your witness will be a powerful driver for the faith of your family members. Just wait for it. It might take a while. It took my great-grandmother's prayers a couple decades for them to come around, but they do come around. I stand on the shoulders of those prayers, without a doubt. God bless you, brother, and thank you. The Unbound Scholar. Go check out the Unbound Scholar. Of course, man. Go and subscribe. Check him out. It's trippy, man. I never thought of myself ever as a YouTuber. It's weird. I never, and then here I am about to break 10K subscribers, and much of that growth has been in the last 4 months. So clearly something's connecting with people, and I'm just so over the moon grateful that I'm able to do that. Gosh, come on. So yeah, go check out the Unbound Scholar, brother. Thank you. Dude, I'm a little retarded. Okay. Reminds me of that clip from Alex Jones. Like, listen, I'm retarded. That's what it's from. I'm high strung, dude. I got a lot of energy. I love talking about these things, and I love just interacting with people. That you guys listen. Social media has changed my life. Okay, it's turned into a full-fledged business. I've been on Pints with Aquinas, Keith Nestor. These men are my friends. I've done conferences or I've spoken. And this is not self-aggrandizing. I still can't believe it. This little seed that God planted in October of 2022 So again, my encouragement to people, because I think like the saints, you look at the table of all the saintly human beings that are in the Catholic Church, the table is endless. If you're somebody that's has it on their hearts to start producing content, this is the new evangelization. We're sitting in it. If you have it on your heart and you're not just trying to go, I never tried to become an influencer. It's still not my job. People are like, you're an influencer. I'm not, dude. I'm not an influencer. I'm trying to point people to Christ. That was my mission at the beginning. Now I'm trying to point people to his mother and mother church. Okay. So it's deeper. So if any of you have an inkling or inspiration to get on social media, do it. There's a seat at the table for everybody. Just don't come on here with like slop apologetics, trying to be the next whatever, because those seats have been filled. Come in, be you. This is how I equate it to, okay? The Lord of the Rings, J.R. Tolkien, staunch Catholic. That movie is just like rife with Catholic imagery and themes. If you look at all those men, they're all equally men, despite being different in stature, and their proportion and distribution of virtue is fundamentally different. And when I thought about it in this way, I said, man, it's kind of like the saints. The only two that have like perfection and virtue above all is Jesus and then the Blessed Virgin Mary. If you look at all the other saints, it's like different proportions of virtue. And it's no different than those of us in the Catholic content creation space. Bring your unique gifts to the table. And if you're doing it out of sincerity and goodness, like you have a place. You have a place. MBs, I don't know how you come up with these names. Yo, Mike, love you too, brother. I love you too, man. Yeah, it's I have to say, going from 1 to 2 was so difficult. You had 6. Glory to Christ. I feel like we're playing catch up with all the trad families at our TLM. They've got like 8, 9, 10 kids. We're there with 3. It's still, what an absolute joy. But glory to God. But yeah, it's hard. So that's why we're just trying to just create an army over here, if God so wills us to have that. What are the biggest things you need to do? I didn't have it figured out when I started dating her, bro. I just knew she was like, I knew she had wifey qualities, and I knew I loved her and I wanted to start a family with her. And then God kind of, okay, real talk, have your faith figured out. You need to be ahead of your wife in terms of your faith above all things. You need to know more. You need to practice more. You dispose her to grace by being that way. If you are a devotee of your faith and you're also a man and you do manly things, you work out, you keep yourself healthy, all these other things, but above all, know your faith, understand your faith, live your faith well, and lead her in the faith above all other things. Okay. And don't treat her like your brother. Don't treat her like a friend, treat her like the woman that she is. I did. I'm a little retarded. I am. I absolutely am, guy. That's what it is. I'm grateful that you're in here asking questions, man. And I wish I could give you more clarity on this topic. And Peter, thank you very much, man. Again, this blows my mind. I get messages from teachers saying, "Oh, I show your YouTube videos to my students," and then stuff like this. I'm like, man, what is going on here? Praise be to Jesus. Thank you. May Christ influence you all the more through me, his instrument, my friend. I am so cheesy sometimes. It's the Italian in me, I can't help it, but like put it on thick. That's just who I am. God bless you, 12. Italian, but hey, I'll take it, dude. It's better than Superman. And dude, God bless you, brother. I will come visit Florida. You're up pretty late, 10:45. Go to bed, my man. Go to bed, my man. God bless you, Mike. Oh, dude. Thank you for the man. You guys are so generous. Man, I don't know where the heck I got that comment from. So to clarify this, the idolize, demonize, humanize, this is a process that a lot of people go through with their fathers. Okay. You grow up idolizing them, then you end up demonizing them. And most guys don't get to the humanized phase. You've got to humanize your father. You've got to forgive him. You got to look at him like a child that was hurt by his father. And that's the only way that you can reconcile that in your heart and see him and love him for, who he is, Cody Skinner, Blue Jays or Yankees? Dude, neither. I don't watch any of that stuff, my man. I'm not a sports ball guy. I don't insult guys that are sports ball guys. The only team that I watch when they're in the playoffs is the Edmonton Oilers. So I'll just put it that way. This is a hard one. So I wouldn't say you have to disassociate yourself from your friends unless unless they are occasions of sin, and the only ways you guys interact are at bars or the subject matter. I always think, like, listen, like Christ sat with sinners. Okay. So if you can be that one guy, because not all my friends are Catholic, not all my friends are Christian, and I can still relate to them. I may not swear like I did before. I may not, act the way that I did, ruminate on sin, etc. But I still want to interact with them, and I want to be a witness for them. And because if in the case that conversation about Christ ever comes up, I want to be there to be able to evangelize them. So, and also trust that the Lord will cull the dead weight of your friendship circle in His timing. Okay, that happens naturally. A lot of guys that I thought I'd be friends with forever are no longer friends with me. Not because I wanted to cut it off, but because kind of God pruned the tree of my life and my friendship circle naturally. So be a witness to those people. Yeah, that was rough. That was rough. I used to be a hardcore Vancouver Canucks fan until they crapped the bed in 2011 with the Boston Bruins. And then from there, I stopped watching sports ball. I stopped watching sports ball altogether. So that was one of those things. It was heartbreaking. But guys, if nobody else has any other questions, I've been doing this for almost 2 hours, and there's 3. I don't know. I can't tell if this is just all YouTube. There's 31 on YouTube, 340 on X. That's crazy. Praise God, man. That's wild. Bunch on Instagram. This went way better than I thought. Brother, listen, when the Euro Cup or the World Cup comes around, I watch. I'm a proper bandwagoning Azzurri fan, but I don't watch Premier League or any of that other stuff, mainly because I just also don't have the time, but this was very successful. I mean, thank you for everybody in the comments. Thank you so much for to everybody that left super chats. Like, man, so generous. I never expected that. There certainly wasn't going to ask for that, especially not my first stream, but I'm definitely going to be doing more of these. Stay tuned every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, 9 p.m. Eastern. I'll be doing a stream of some kind. If you want to drop suggestions, I'm just going to kind of riff off what I normally talk about, but thank you for hanging around. For those of you that stuck around from the beginning, love you guys. You guys have helped change my life for the better, and I hope you got something out of this. So God bless you. Glory to Jesus Christ. And I will catch you guys soon. God bless all of you.